The sun was warm that afternoon, and the sound of sneakers on pavement echoed through the quiet streets. A tall, lean teenager walked home with a basketball under one arm and his phone in the other. He had just finished practice at the community center, sweat still clinging to his forehead. It had been a good day. He was thinking about getting a cold drink from the store before heading home to finish his homework. Everything about the day felt normal, until it didn't. As he turned the corner onto Maple Street, a police cruiser slowed down beside him. The sound of the tires against the road broke his focus. He looked up confused, wondering if the officers inside were looking for directions or someone else. Instead, the passenger side window rolled down, and one of the officers gave him a long, suspicious look. "Hey, you, hold up a second," the officer called out. His tone wasn't friendly. It carried the kind of authority that demanded obedience. The boy stopped, clutching his basketball a little tighter. "Yes, sir," he said politely. He had been taught to always stay calm and respectful no matter what. His mother had made that very clear. The officer stepped out of the car and adjusted his belt. "Where are you coming from?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Basketball practice, sir. At the community center," the teen replied. The officer's partner got out from the driver's side, circling slightly behind him. "Got some ID on you?" The second one asked. "Yes, sir. It's in my bag." "Go ahead and get it," the first officer said. He moved slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. His hands trembled a little as he reached into his gym bag. He pulled out his wallet and held it up. "It's right here." The first officer took the ID and stared at it for a moment, then looked back at the boy. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. 2 streets over." The second officer was already scanning the area, glancing toward the nearby shops. He spoke quietly to his partner, but the boy could still hear. "Fits the description. Hoodie, black shorts, backpack." His stomach tightened. He wanted to ask what was going on, but he didn't. He just stood there, hoping it would be over soon. Then came the question that made his pulse quicken. "Where were you about 15 minutes ago?" "At the gym." "You can ask Coach, I just left," he said. The officer raised a brow. "That's funny because we got a call about a shoplifting suspect who looks a lot like you." The teen blinked, confused. "Shoplifting? I didn't do anything like that." The second officer folded his arms. "Mind if we check your bag?" I don't have anything except my stuff from practice," he said, his voice shaking. "That wasn't the question," the officer said firmly. "We need to make sure you're not carrying stolen items." The teen hesitated. His mom had always told him to know his rights. But at that moment, all he wanted was to get home safely. "Okay," he said softly, lowering his bag to the ground. The first officer grabbed it and started going through it. "Shoes, towel, water bottle, and phone charger. Nothing else, see?" the boy said, trying to sound calm, but the officers didn't seem convinced. The first one looked annoyed. "You got any receipts for where you've been today?" He frowned, confused. "Receipts? I didn't buy anything. I just went to practice." The officer sighed and looked at his partner. "Let's run his name." While the first officer walked back to the cruiser, the second one stood close, his hand resting on his belt. The boy could feel the tension in the air. His heart raced. He tried to stay still, but his fingers twitched nervously around the basketball. The officer noticed. "Relax, kid. You're acting jumpy." "I'm just nervous, sir," he said quietly. "Nervous people usually have something to hide," the officer muttered. His throat felt dry. He wanted to explain that he was scared because of how things like this could go wrong, but he stayed silent. He thought of his mother again, her calm voice, her advice. If something happens, stay respectful, stay alive. The first officer came back, looking at his tablet. "No record. But the store manager said the suspect ran this way. You sure you didn't see anyone?" "No, sir. I just left the gym and went to the store for a drink." The officer stepped closer. "You said you went to a store?" "Which one?" "The corner shop by the park." "So you were at a store. You see how that sounds?" the officer asked. "I just bought water," the boy said softly. "Do you have the bottle?" He nodded and pointed to his bag. The officer pulled it out and stared at the label, as if a plain water bottle could prove guilt. "Where's the receipt?" "I threw it away," the boy said. "It was just $1. The officers exchanged a look. The first one sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, son." "I'm not trying to," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The officer motioned for him to turn around. "We're just going to pat you down. Standard procedure, his hands trembled. He didn't want to move the wrong way. He raised his arms slowly. Okay. The officer started patting down his hoodie and pockets. The moment felt endless. Every breath felt heavier than the last. Bystanders had started to gather, a few people standing on the sidewalk, some holding their phones up, recording. He heard whispers. Someone said, "That kid didn't do anything." Another voice added, "Why are they searching him?" The officers seemed aware of the attention but didn't stop. The first officer finished searching him and stepped back. "Nothing," he muttered to his partner. The boy turned around slowly, hoping it was over. But the second officer shook his head. "Still doesn't add up." The first officer looked at the boy again. "You sure you didn't run into anyone on the way here?" "No, sir. I didn't see anyone." "What about that store clerk?" "You get along with him?" "Yes, sir. He knows me. I've been going there since I was little." The officer's expression softened for a brief moment, then hardened again. "All right. Stay right here." The boy watched as the officers walked a few steps away, talking in low voices. His heart was still pounding. He picked up his basketball and held it tight against his chest, wishing he could disappear. The people around him kept recording. He could feel all their eyes on him. Minutes passed like hours. The officers seemed unsure of what to do next. One of them spoke into his radio, asking for confirmation about the suspect's clothing. The boy could hear static from the other end. Then something changed. The second officer turned toward him again. "You got a phone, kid?" He nodded. "Yes, sir. It's in my bag. Call your parents. Let's get this cleared up," the officer said, though his tone still carried suspicion. Relieved, the boy crouched down to grab his phone. Just as he picked it up, the officer behind him shouted, "Hey, don't move!" Startled, he froze. "I'm just getting my phone," he said quickly, raising it in both hands so they could see. The officer's hand hovered near his holster. The air grew tense again. The crowd gasped. A woman's voice rang out, "He's just a kid." The officer finally lowered his hand. "Fine, call." The boy's fingers shook as he dialed his mom's number. She didn't answer on the first try. He tried again. Still no answer. His chest tightened. He left a message, his voice unsteady. "Mom, please call me. Something's happening with the police." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, still trembling. The officers were talking again, their voices hushed. One of them seemed unsure, glancing back at the crowd of people watching. The tension hung in the air like thick fog. The boy took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He looked down the street, wishing he could see his mother's car pulling up. She always knew what to do. She always made things right, but for now, he stood there on the curb, under the glare of the afternoon sun, surrounded by people who didn't know him and officers who didn't trust him, just hoping that someone, somehow, would believe he was telling the truth. The air around the street felt heavy, filled with whispers and the soft hum of engines passing by. The teenager stood still on the curb, clutching his basketball like it was the only thing holding him together. The officers hadn't left yet. They were still there, still talking quietly, still glancing at him as if trying to decide what to do next. Every second felt longer than the last. He didn't understand why they were still holding him there. They had searched his bag, found nothing, checked his ID. He'd done everything they asked. But the way they kept looking at him made it clear. They still didn't believe him. One of the officers finally walked back over. His tone was less harsh now, but still guarded. "Look, kid, we're waiting for confirmation from the store security footage. If it's not you, you'll be on your way soon." The boy nodded. "Okay, sir." He tried to sound calm, but inside he was breaking. The small crowd had grown. People were murmuring, a few holding up phones, filming every moment. He could hear snippets of their comments, some frustrated, some angry, some scared for him. He didn't look at them. He just stared at the ground, wishing the whole thing would end. Minutes passed. The sun dipped a little lower, shadows stretching across the pavement. The sound of a police radio crackled from inside the cruiser. The officer by the door stepped closer to listen. The teen tried to read his face, but the officer's expression didn't give anything away. Then the officer said something quietly to his partner. The other one nodded. "All right," the first officer said. "Looks like the footage isn't clear yet. We'll need to take you down to the station just to sort things out." The boy's stomach dropped. "What? But I didn't do anything." "You can ask my coach. He'll tell you I was at practice." We're not saying you did, son. But we have to follow procedure, the officer replied as if that made it okay. He took a step back, shaking his head. Please, sir. I swear I didn't steal anything. His voice cracked slightly, his hands trembling. He wasn't shouting, but there was fear in his tone. Real fear that even the officers couldn't ignore. The second officer sighed. Just cooperate, all right? The sooner we clear this up, the sooner you go home. But the boy wasn't sure he believed that. He had seen enough videos online to know how easily things could go wrong. He looked at the crowd, hoping someone might speak up for him. One woman holding a grocery bag called out, "He's telling the truth. I saw him at the store. He just bought water." The officers exchanged a glance, uncertain. "Ma'am, please step back," one of them said quickly. The woman hesitated, then did as she was told. But her voice carried, "You're making a mistake." The boy felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe now they'd listen. But instead, one officer took out a notepad. "Name and number, ma'am? We might need a statement." She gave it, shaking her head as she walked away. The teen stood there silently, staring at the ground, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him. The moment felt endless. Then something unexpected happened. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out carefully, showing the officers he was just checking a call. It was his mother. He quickly answered, voice trembling. "Mom?" Her tone was calm, but he could hear the sharpness beneath it. "What's going on?" "You left a message." He swallowed hard. "The police stopped me, Mom. They said I looked like someone who stole something." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then her voice changed, still calm but colder, more controlled. "Where are you right now?" "Maple Street, near the park." "I'm on my way," she said. "Don't move. Keep your phone on." He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Okay, Mom." He hung up slowly, his heart pounding a little faster. Somehow, just knowing she was coming made him feel a little safer. He didn't know exactly what she would do, but he knew she would fix this. She always did. One of the officers noticed his expression. "You call your parents?" "Yes, sir. My mom's coming." The officer nodded slightly, though he didn't seem thrilled about it. "All right. We'll wait." The boy stayed quiet, his mind spinning. He thought about how his mom always told him to stay respectful no matter what. She had a way of talking about these things that made him realize she knew more than she said. Now he was starting to understand why. The sound of tires approaching pulled everyone's attention toward the corner. A black SUV came around the bend and stopped sharply by the curb. The engine cut off and a woman stepped out, wearing a dark jacket and sunglasses. She moved quickly but not in panic, with purpose. The officers straightened immediately. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're handling an investigation here." She took off her sunglasses, revealing sharp, steady eyes. "I'm aware," she said. "That's my son." The officers glanced at each other. One of them said, "Ma'am, we were just asking him some questions. He matches a description." "Did you find anything on him?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. "No, ma'am, but we're still waiting on store footage." She nodded slightly, then reached into her jacket and pulled out a leather badge case. She opened it just enough for them to see the gold emblem inside. A federal badge. The officers froze. One of them blinked, clearly unsure what to say. "You're FBI," she said evenly. "Now tell me exactly what happened here." The energy on the street shifted instantly. The small crowd fell quiet. The boy looked at his mother with wide eyes. He had never seen her like this before, so calm yet so commanding. The officers straightened their posture, their earlier confidence fading. "Ma'am, there seems to be some confusion," the first officer began carefully. "We received a call about a possible theft suspect matching his description." "And your description was what exactly?" she asked. The officer hesitated. "Young male, dark hoodie, backpack." She raised an eyebrow. "That's half the teenagers in this city." Neither officer spoke. She stepped closer, her voice dropping slightly but still steady. "You searched him, didn't you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Found anything?" "No, ma'am." "Then why is he still standing here, surrounded by cameras and half the neighborhood?" The officers glanced toward the crowd, realizing how many people were still recording. One of them mumbled, "We were just following protocol." She gave a small, sharp nod. "Protocol doesn't include detaining minors without cause, or treating them like suspects when you have zero evidence." The second officer shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we didn't mean any harm." "You already did," she said quietly. The boy watched her, amazed at how composed she remained. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Every word carried weight. She turned to her son. "Are you okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." She glanced back at the officers. "This ends now. You'll release him, and you'll both file a written report explaining why he was stopped without reasonable suspicion. I'll make sure Internal Affairs receives a copy." One officer swallowed hard. "Understood, ma'am." The other nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." She gave a curt nod. "Good." Then she turned to her son again. "Let's go." They walked together toward her car. The crowd began to murmur again, some people even clapping softly. Others simply stood in stunned silence, realizing who she was and what had just happened. Before she got into the car, she looked back at the officers one last time. "You should remember this moment," she said, "because next time you stop a kid for matching a description, he might not have someone like me to show up." Then she got into the car and closed the door. The boy sat beside her, still shaken, his hands gripping the basketball tightly. They drove off in silence for a while, the tension slowly fading as the distance grew between them and the flashing lights behind. After a few minutes, his mother finally spoke. Her tone was softer now. "Are you all right?" He nodded. "Yeah, I was scared, though." "I know," she said quietly. "You did everything right. I'm proud of you." He looked out the window, the streetlights blurring as they passed. "How did you know what to say to them?" She smiled faintly. "It's my job to know." He turned toward her, studying her face. For the first time, he saw her not just as his mom, but as someone powerful, someone who had seen and dealt with things most people never would. "Mom," he said softly, "does this kind of thing happen a lot?" Her hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "More than it should," she admitted, "and that's why I do what I do. To change it." He nodded, the words sinking deep. The fear he had felt earlier slowly turned into something else, a quiet determination. He didn't want anyone else to feel like he did standing on that curb, powerless and scared. As they turned down their street, his mother reached over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "No matter what happens," she said, "never forget who you are. You're not anyone's suspect. You're my son, and you have every right to walk home in peace." He nodded, swallowing hard. The tears he'd been holding back finally fell, but he didn't hide them. For the first time since it all began, he felt safe again. And as they pulled into their driveway, he knew this day would stay with him forever. Not just as a moment of fear, but as the day he learned what real strength looked like. The ride home was quiet, the kind of silence that fills every corner of the car. The teen sat beside his mother, staring out the window as the city lights passed by. He could still feel the tension in his chest, like the fear hadn't completely gone away yet. His mother kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting near him, as if ready to reach out if he needed comfort. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes said everything. She was angry, but she was also calm in a way that came from years of training. When they finally pulled into the driveway, he let out a deep breath. Their home felt like a different world from the street where everything had happened. Inside, the lights were soft, the air warm, and the quiet sound of the clock ticking was almost soothing. His mom set her bag on the table and took off her jacket, hanging it neatly on the chair. "Sit down," she said gently. He sat at the kitchen table, still holding his basketball. His mom poured a glass of water for him and placed it in front of him before sitting down across from him. "You did the right thing today," she said quietly. "You stayed calm, you followed their directions. I know that wasn't easy." He looked down at his hands. "I thought they were going to take me." Her voice softened. "I know. That's why I told you to always call me if something like that happens." He nodded slowly. "I did. I'm glad you came." She gave a faint smile. "You don't have to thank me for that. I'll always come." For a few minutes they sat in silence. The fear he had felt on the street still lingered. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flashing lights, the faces of the officers, the way everyone was staring at him. He thought about how quickly things could have gone wrong. If his mom hadn't shown up when she did, he didn't even want to finish that thought. His mom finally broke the silence. "I'm going to file a report tomorrow. What they did was not okay," he frowned. "Will they get in trouble?" "There will be an investigation," she said. "It might take time, but they need to understand that actions like that have consequences." He nodded, still unsure how he felt. Part of him wanted to forget everything. Another part wanted to make sure it never happened again. Not to him, not to anyone. Later that night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come easily. Every sound outside made him flinch a little. The distant siren of an ambulance made his heart skip. He turned over, hugging his pillow tighter. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from a friend who had seen the video online. Someone in the crowd must have uploaded it. The message said, "Bro, is that really you? It's all over social media." He opened the link. The video was already spreading. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. People were angry. Some were shocked. Others were just talking, debating, arguing. The caption said, "Teen stopped by police for no reason, until his mom shows up." He watched the short clip, heart pounding. He saw himself standing there, nervous and scared. He saw the officers, their harsh tone, their hands near their belts. Then he saw the moment his mom arrived, the way she handled everything with calm authority, the crowd cheering quietly when she showed her badge. He turned the phone off and put it down. He wasn't sure how to feel. Proud maybe, relieved, but also exposed. His life was suddenly a topic for strangers to discuss. The next morning, he woke up to the smell of breakfast. His mom was already up, dressed in her work clothes. She was talking quietly on the phone, her tone professional. When she hung up, she smiled at him faintly. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Not really," she nodded. "I'm not surprised. Something like that doesn't just go away overnight." He sat at the table while she poured him a cup of juice. "People saw the video," he said quietly. She paused. "I know. I saw it too. It's everywhere." "That might actually be a good thing," she said. "Sometimes the truth needs to be seen. It keeps people honest." He nodded, though he wasn't sure he wanted that kind of attention. He didn't want to be known as the kid from the video. He just wanted things to go back to normal. After breakfast, his mom left for work. Before she did, she reminded him, "Stay home today. I'll be meeting with internal affairs. We'll talk more when I get back." He promised he would. When the door closed, he sat in the living room, flipping through channels on the TV. Almost every station was talking about what had happened. He saw blurred images of himself and his mom, news anchors discussing racial profiling and accountability. They called it a tense but peaceful encounter. He turned off the TV. It felt strange hearing people talk about him like that, like he was a story, not a person. By afternoon, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, he found the woman from the store standing there, the one who had spoken up for him the day before. She smiled softly. "Hey, I just wanted to see if you were okay." He nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you for helping me yesterday." She waved a hand. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not everyone does," he said quietly. She smiled again. "Well, maybe now more people will. The video's making people talk. Maybe that's something." He thought about that for a second. Maybe she was right. Maybe something good could come from all this. He thanked her again before she left. Later that evening, his mom came home looking tired but calm. She placed her keys on the table and sat down across from him. "I met with the department today," she said. "They're taking it seriously. The officers will be interviewed. There's body cam footage too. Are they in trouble?" he asked. "They're being reviewed," she said carefully. "That's what matters right now." He nodded slowly. "I saw the video again. Everyone keeps saying how brave you were." She smiled faintly. "Brave is when you face something even though you're scared. That was you, not me." He looked down, embarrassed but grateful. "I was just trying to do what you taught me." "And you did it perfectly," she said softly. The room was quiet again. Then she said something that made him look up. "I've seen too many cases like that one," she said. "People stopped for no reason, treated like criminals before anyone knows the truth. That's why I joined the Bureau, because I wanted to be on the inside, where change could actually start." He listened carefully, her words sticking in his mind. "Do you think things will change?" She looked at him for a long moment. "If we keep talking about it, yes. If we keep standing up for what's right, yes." He nodded slowly. Maybe she was right. Maybe what happened wasn't just a bad day. Maybe it was the start of something bigger. That night, as he lay in bed again, he opened his phone. The comments under the video had changed. People weren't just angry anymore. They were sharing stories, talking about experiences, calling for change. It wasn't just about him now. It was about something much larger. He scrolled for a while, then stopped on one comment that stood out. It said, That mom is a hero, but the real hero is her son for staying calm when no one else would. He smiled a little, feeling warmth spread through his chest. For the first time since that day, he felt proud, not just because of what his mom had done, but because he had done his part too. Before falling asleep, he texted his mom, even though she was in the next room. "Thanks for everything. I love you." A moment later, her reply came, "Always. I love you more." And for the first time in 2 days, he slept peacefully, knowing that no matter what the world saw him as, his mother saw him as everything, her son, her reason to fight, and proof that standing up for what's right could truly make a difference. The following morning, the sun peeked through the curtains, casting soft light across the living room. The teen was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels when his mom walked in holding her coffee mug. She looked more rested than the day before, but her eyes still carried that quiet focus that came with her line of work. She sat beside him and handed him her tablet. "You might want to see this," she said. On the screen was a news article titled, "FBI Operative Steps in During Questionable Police Stop." There was a picture of her standing in front of the officers, her badge visible. The story described how she had calmly de-escalated the situation, identifying herself as an agent, and how that moment had gone viral. The article praised her professionalism, but also highlighted the bigger issue, how easily things could have gone wrong. He read quietly, scrolling through the comments. Most people were supportive. Many wrote messages like, "She handled that perfectly," or, "This mom is a real-life hero." But there were a few who questioned everything, suggesting it was exaggerated or staged. That part stung a little. His mom noticed his frown. "Don't focus on the negative," she said softly. "The important thing is that people are talking about it. Really talking." He nodded, though he wasn't sure how he felt about being part of a national conversation. He didn't want attention. He just wanted fairness. After breakfast, his mom got a call. She stepped into her home office and closed the door. He could hear her voice through the wall, firm, calm, professional. It was the same tone she had used that day when she faced the officers. When she came out, she looked thoughtful. "That was my supervisor," she said. "The Bureau wants to meet with us. They think the story has become big enough that we should speak about it officially." He blinked. "Speak about it? Like, in public?" She nodded slowly. "They're arranging a press conference. They want to show transparency, not just from law enforcement, but from within the system. They want to remind people that accountability matters." He sat back, unsure. The thought of cameras and reporters made his stomach twist. But seeing the determination in his mom's face gave him some comfort. "Will I have to talk too?" he asked. She smiled gently. "Only if you want to. No one will force you. But your voice matters more than you realize." He thought about that for a while. He wasn't sure if he was ready to speak, but part of him wanted to. Maybe if people heard from him directly, they'd understand what it really felt like, not just the headlines. Later that day, his phone buzzed again with messages. Friends, classmates, even teachers had seen the video. Some were proud of him, some just curious. A few sent words of support saying how wrong it all was. He didn't reply to most of them, but he read every message. That evening, he and his mom went for a walk around their neighborhood. The cool breeze helped ease his mind. People who recognized them waved or nodded in quiet respect. A few even stopped to thank his mom for what she did. "You showed a lot of strength out there," one older man said as he passed. "We need more people like you." She smiled politely and thanked him, but as they kept walking, she said quietly, "It shouldn't take moments like that for people to be treated fairly." He looked at her, understanding what she meant. She didn't enjoy the attention. She wanted change. The next few days were a blur of meetings and calls. The Bureau set up the press conference at their local headquarters. News outlets confirmed attendance. His mom prepared carefully, reviewing her statement and discussing it with the legal team. She reminded him again that he didn't have to speak unless he wanted to. When the day came, they both dressed neatly, she in her navy blazer and he in a plain white shirt. As they drove to the building, he could see the line of cameras already waiting outside. His stomach tightened, but his mom reached over and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Remember," she said, "just be yourself. Tell the truth. That's all that matters." Inside the conference room, bright lights and microphones filled the space. Reporters whispered among themselves. When they stepped up to the podium, the room went silent. His mom spoke first. Her voice was steady, her words clear. She explained what had happened that day, how her son had been stopped without clear cause, how she had identified herself, and how things de-escalated once transparency entered the situation. She didn't raise her voice or accuse anyone personally. Instead, she spoke about fairness, training, and communication. This isn't about blame, she said. It's about understanding. It's about making sure every officer, every citizen, every young person feels safe in their own community. Her words carried weight. The room was quiet and every reporter listened carefully. Then one of them asked if her son wanted to say something. She turned to him gently. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly as he held the microphone. "I didn't think something like that would happen to me," he said softly. "I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just wanted to go home. I didn't know what to do, I just remembered what my mom taught me. Stay calm, be respectful, don't panic. But even when you do everything right, it still feels scary when you don't know if someone sees you as a person or a problem." He paused, his voice shaking slightly. But he continued, "I'm not here to make anyone look bad. I just want people to understand how it feels. I want kids like me to know they have a right to be treated fairly. And I want people in uniform to know that their words and actions can change everything in a few seconds." When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, then filled with applause. His mom put a hand on his shoulder, proud and emotional. Reporters called out more questions, but she politely ended the session after thanking everyone. As they left the building, flashes from cameras followed them, but it didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt like they had done something important, something that might actually reach people. That night, back at home, they watched the replay on TV. The coverage was positive. Analysts praised both of them for handling everything with grace and courage. Commentators said their words had started a much-needed conversation about trust and accountability between communities and police. His mom turned off the TV after a while. "Enough of that," she said with a small laugh. "We need a break from screens," he smiled. "Do you think it'll really change anything?" She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Change doesn't happen overnight. But this is how it starts. One story, one voice at a time." He leaned back on the couch, feeling lighter than before. Maybe the fear that day had turned into something good after all. Over the next week, messages continued to pour in. People from other cities, even other countries, shared their stories. His mom was invited to speak at a community forum. Local schools asked if she and her son would come talk to students about safety and respect. They agreed, not for attention, but because they wanted to help others understand. At the school auditorium, he looked out at the sea of faces. Students who looked just like him, some curious, some nervous. When he spoke, he kept it simple. "I learned that fear can make people do the wrong thing," he said, "but kindness and calm can make things right again." Afterward, students came up to thank him. Some even shared their own stories of being treated unfairly. He realized how much people needed someone to listen, someone who understood. Back home that night, he sat by his window looking at the stars. He thought about how much had changed in just a few days. The world suddenly felt bigger, but also more connected. He didn't know what would come next, but he felt stronger now, not just because of what he had been through, but because he had found his voice. His mom walked in quietly and stood beside him. "Proud of you," she said simply. He smiled, looking at her reflection in the window. "I learned from the best." She laughed softly and put an arm around his shoulders. They stood there in silence for a while, just breathing, just existing. Mother and son, two people who had faced something frightening and turned it into hope for others. Outside, the night was peaceful. And for the first time in a long while, so was the world inside their hearts. The weekend arrived, bringing with it a sense of calm the teenager hadn't felt in weeks. The tension of the past days was slowly fading, replaced by a cautious optimism. He sat at the kitchen table with a notebook in front of him, scribbling down thoughts and feelings. Writing had always helped him make sense of confusing moments, and this week had been more than confusing. It had been life-changing. His mother poured 2 mugs of hot chocolate and joined him. She didn't sit right across from him this time, but beside him, close enough that he could feel her presence, steady and reassuring. "How are you feeling today?" she asked softly. He shrugged. "Better, I guess. Still thinking about everything that happened, though. That's normal, she said. You went through a lot. It's okay to take your time to process it all. He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. The warmth spread through him, grounding him in the present. For the first time since the incident, he allowed himself to breathe without fear. Over the next few days, they both worked on the follow-up. His mother guided him through writing a statement for the community forum and the local news outlet. He described what he had felt during the stop, how he had tried to stay calm, and how his mother's arrival had changed everything. He wrote honestly, carefully, hoping that sharing his experience could help others who might face similar situations. The teenager also began helping his mom with a small project at the bureau. She had arranged for a community workshop on awareness, safety, and understanding between young people and police officers. It wasn't just a lecture. It was interactive, giving teens the chance to ask questions, express fears, and share stories. The boy realized that being part of this project allowed him to take the fear he had felt and turn it into something positive. The first session was nerve-wracking. Sitting in a room full of teenagers, some of whom had experienced their own encounters with law enforcement, he felt the same apprehension he had felt on that street. But when he stood up to speak, he remembered his mom's advice. Be calm, be respectful, and speak the truth. I want to tell you about a day that was really hard for me, he began. I was stopped by the police for something I didn't do. I felt scared, nervous, and powerless. But I stayed calm because my mom taught me to. When she arrived, everything changed. That day taught me that fear can be real, but courage can come from the people who care about you and the way you act in those moments. The room was silent at first. Then students began nodding and whispering. Some shared their own experiences after he spoke. The session lasted longer than expected, but by the end he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had turned a frightening experience into a lesson for others, showing that speaking up and staying calm could make a real difference. Back at home that evening, they reviewed the recordings from the session. They laughed at small mistakes, but they also pointed out moments that were especially powerful. His mother praised him for his courage, reminding him that every word had mattered. As the days passed, the story continued to circulate online, and more people reached out to thank him and his mother. Some had been inspired to advocate for better training, to stand up for fairness, or to simply listen to the experiences of young people in their communities. The boy began to see the ripple effect of one event that had seemed so negative at first. One afternoon, while doing homework at the kitchen table, he looked up to see his mother reviewing documents on her laptop. She glanced at him and smiled. You know, you're part of something bigger now, she said. Not because you wanted attention, but because you shared your story honestly. He looked down, feeling a mix of pride and humility. I just wanted to get through that day. And you did more than that, she said. You helped others understand what it's like to be in your shoes. The boy thought about the officers, the crowd, and the streets that had seemed so intimidating. He realized he had grown through the experience. He had learned about fear, about standing up for yourself, and about the importance of having people who care. Later that week, they were invited to a community event where local leaders, police officers, and residents came together to talk about fairness and accountability. He watched as people shared their own stories, and he felt a deep connection to everyone in the room. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating understanding. When it was his turn to speak, he shared a short story from the street, the fear, the confusion, and the moment his mother showed up. He emphasized that it wasn't just about one person showing up to make a difference, but about how people could support each other and stand up for fairness in everyday moments. After the event, several officers approached him. Some thanked him for sharing, admitting that hearing a teenager's perspective was eye-opening. Others asked his mother for guidance on improving community relations. The teenager realized that the moment on Maple Street, which had seemed so frightening, had opened doors for dialogue he hadn't thought possible.